John, it's great to meet you, man, and thank you so much for joining me to talk about Speed Racer.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you for taking the time.
I'm really excited for this because Speed Racer is one of those films that, that's only grown louder, bolder, and more beloved with time.
Mhm.
And before even the news came out about this, the re-release in theaters and the 4K edition, back in January, I actually rented out a movie theater for my car club to watch Speed Racer. And so I don't know, maybe I had a hunch or something. I had no clue that this was going to be happening. I guess I was ahead of the curve of what was coming next. But it says a lot about how much love is still out there for this movie, regardless if the studios talk about it or not. There is a fandom. And honestly, we had some people that never seen it before. Or
Really?
especially, yeah. So we had a good mixed crowd of all generations because my car club is classic cars, hot rods, muscle cars. And then I had some folks from Nerdtropolis as well. So you had a good mixture and everyone had a great time watching this. But with the 4K version is just off the chain. Now fans get to experience it obviously with this new restoration, and it feels super exciting because more Speed Racer the better. But
I'm with
before
you.
but before we do get into it, I wanted you if you can explain what a colorist does, how that creative process usually works with the team, the directors, and just in general everyone you work with, and the rest of everyone else to kind of put this product together in a new better way.
Oh yeah, absolutely, no problem. But Sean, before we even get started, I don't want to burn your time. But what car do you have? Now I'm super interested. And you have a car club?
Yeah. So when I started the car club, it all came because I bought a '06 GTO with the LS engine. So a Pontiac GTO, so a modern
Yeah.
muscle. And then later
Uh-huh.
on, I bought a 1932 Pontiac 5.1 coupe. I still have that. So it's
Yeah.
unrestored, very Bonnie and Clyde like. And then I have a
Yeah.
1968 Plymouth police car, kind of like the Adam 12
Okay.
car. So I have that. And then my daily, which is a fun little car, is a Hummer H2, a limited edition one. So
Oh, right on.
a little all over the place.
I'm very big into vintage VWs. So
Oh,
I've got a
yeah.
60 bug. Much to my wife's chagrin, that's what I was taking most of my weekends wrenching on that thing. So very, very cool.
No, I love that. I love hearing that. I love that for car guys. I mean, Speed Racer is made for car guys too,
Yeah.
and beyond.
Carfu. So what a colorist does is essentially kind of defining the look, right? It's a weird position because we have one foot in the extreme technical side of things and the other foot in the art, right? It's really the artistry of crafting digital pixels, right? Like and really trying to, when you're doing a restoration, it's a little bit different than doing new theatrical stuff. New theatrical, you're trying to find what's the core of the story and set tone and a number of different things when you're working with a DP when you're trying to craft something from scratch. But in this case, the world has already been built, so it's really about staying true to that original vision and really, working with the Wachowskis. What would you do now, right? And not veering too far off. It's just the modern tools nowadays are so much more advanced than what they had back then, and they were really pushing the boundary back then. I remember when we were in session, they were talking about how the avids were just basically dying on some of these composites because I mean you got stacks, layers. There was some instances where I didn't have a cut for like 2 minutes, right? Where it's like because there was no place to make a clean edit. And so one of the tricky things for me and my team over here was how do you grade these shots when there is no cut, right? Usually, typically, we have to find, back in the day, it was like programming. You'd say up until this time code, it's these kind of settings, right? And then at this time code switch, it's these settings. But in Speed Racer, because you have so many things layered on top of each other, we had to actually roto out a lot of that. We didn't have the original visual effects, so the mats are gone, right? We don't have the original breakdown of all those layers. So we just have it as a baked piece. So, my team here was basically carving out a lot of those transitions to make sure that we could hit this shot the way that we wanted it. And then the shot coming in, right, is transferring through that. So we had to rebuild quite a bit of that. But yeah, ultimately, a colorist is there to be a good ombudsman of the look of the film.
I mean, obviously you pulled it off. I mean, if no one's told me, this was kind of all this work was put in, you kind of don't notice. And I think that's also a good thing about that. You've been part of a lot of great projects, a lot of films. Your hands have been a lot of great things. But when they first said, "Hey, we need you for Speed Racer," what was your initial thought on revisiting a film with such a wild visual style? Something that's definitely ahead of its time.
Well, it really wasn't like that. It was me going, I want to do that one. Because so that it goes way back to my father, and my father was very big in animation. He wrote and directed a bunch of the old Ninja Turtles, the 1980s ones, and so I come from a family of animation. Little known fact as well, he also post-souped a short-lived version of the New Adventures of Speed Racer. He was a huge fan. One of the earliest projects that he had was he took Robotech, and he brought it over here and then rewrote the dialogue, so keeping the same story but trying to match the mouths to the Japanese animation. And he's always been a fan of the animation they were doing in Japan. He always thought they were doing it way better. We're never going to get as good. And you could see a little bit of that in the Ninja Turtles. So when this came about, it was like, oh no. There's no better person to do this than me. Like, I have to do this film. This is like, it's so personal. And it's a story about family, really, when it comes down to it, right? Yes, there is racing and there's cars, but it's really about the dynamics of the family and the brother, uh, passing away, but to speed, not actually. And that happened in my life, right? Where my brother actually passed away in a car accident. And so all of these things together, it was just like, no. I want to do this one. Also, let's talk about like a colorist's dream job, right? This is like push it to the max. Let's candy color this. There's no better project to really stretch your legs. Every job sets its own rules, and you kind of stay within those boundaries. The great thing about this one is the rules are the edges. It's the edges of whatever color space you're in. So at the time when they were doing this originally, right, the technology was a little bit limited, right? We were in mostly 709 containers. P3 was just becoming a thing. And nowadays, with some of these new displays coming from the likes of LG and Samsung, where you can hit these extreme wide color gamuts with, some of the QD OLEDs, the OLEDs out there, micro RGB. This is the time now. This is the time to go, okay, what is the boundary? And let's go past it and take one step back.
I love hearing how personal this film is to you for many reasons. What's the biggest thing that you wanted to protect when working on this 4K version?
Well, so there are two things, right? One, the whole goal is for it to be a live action anime, right? So I never wanted to take away that original charm. It always had to stay true to itself. And now there's certain scenes, like for example, the ice cave, where and it's a departure, but it's actually not, because the data that was sitting in the visual effect was truly this cyan, like when CO2 gets trapped in ice, like that kind of cyan blue that you see up in like the glaciers, right? And nobody ever saw what was actually hiding underneath. And so like you want to stay true to the original intent and how the renders were originally done, but it was constrained before, and that would swing it towards a magenta. When you hit a border, when you're coming to the end of the gamut, you hit here, and the color actually has to turn. So you either go towards magenta or you go towards cyan. And when you're limited like that, there is no choice. You have to say, okay, well, then I guess it's just going to be this magenta-ish blue, because that's the most blue we can get at the time. But now, because we've expanded it out, now all of a sudden it goes into that wonderful cyan, that very icy color, and it has a totally different feel. It's the same data, it's the same shot, but it's seen in a new way. And so really it's about staying true to the original vision, making sure the Wachowskis were telling the story that they want to tell through the color process, and really getting them to, what would you do if you could do this now, right, with the wider color gamut. One of the other things that they changed was they always felt like the blacks were a little bit too thick, too chunky, right? And so one of the things that we did was we took mid gray and we lifted it up a little bit, and across the board I applied that just right off the bat. And that was kind of an ongoing discussion. If you see now in the new remaster, before there would be like a black background, and Speed's hair, there was no separation between that. It was just black on top, and you could not see where the background started and where his hair picked up, right? And now if you look into it, the shadows, the way that the toe of the curve comes out, you can see that first step out of black. And that's so important of how an image comes out of darkness. And you can just pick up his outline, which gives it more separation, which gives the character more prominence in the scene, and really kind of helps to accentuate like where your eye is tracking.
I absolutely need you like on every single film project, TV project, so we can make the experience better at home for everybody. Because the things you describe as things that are also not a problem, but it's prone to other projects that suffer from some of this stuff too. Especially today, they don't really pay attention to some of the grading that's necessary for home viewing as well. And I think that's very important to make a film, restore a film where it's enjoyable at home too. You know, you put
Mm-hmm.
all that work in, you want it to pay off, especially with the type of televisions we have these days. You know, what is the difference on making something look better than making something look completely different? You talked about the ice scene and stuff like that. And you also wanted to make it better, but also not make it stand out too much. So it's like almost like a completely different scene.
Sure. If you go to my website, I have a before and after of what the 2K version was. One of the things that we had to do as well is that this lived in a 2K world, partly because of the camera technology at the time, and also just the sheer amount of rendering. It's typical even today to do visual effects at 2K just for economics. Um, so one of the things we had to do is, okay, how are we going to make this UHD? I'm not a huge fan of some of the off-the-shelf like AI upres tools that are out there in the world. We know those remasters. We're not going to name any names, but one of the things that we've developed in house here is a tool called Samurai. And what it does is it actually looks at your picture. It knows the difference between film grain, video noise, and what is actually image. And it only will latch on to the high frequency detail. And this is going to get really techie. And sorry if it's too nerdy. The safety word is
Never too nerdy, obviously.
But what it basically does is we scale it up. And if you think of a checkerboard, we're going to have missing pixels, right? You take the original frame and you double it. So now every other pixel is missing, right? Like kind of in checkerboard. And what we do is we in paint those pixels. And so it's looking at its neighbors and it's saying, well, based on this image, I need to be this. And so it's a very effective way to upres something without it feeling artificial or without it feeling like it has been upres. So that was a very critical part. We did that very early on in the process because also we want to catch anything that it was maybe not helping, right? Like, so sometimes around text, it can get a little bit too aliased or something like that. So we do that very early on so that while we're grading, it's kind of like an additional QC pass. We're looking at the image the whole time, the one that will be the final. So that was one step. The other step is, again, you kind of hit the nail on the head with, we want to look good at home, right? As you can see, I'm in a very dark environment typically, right? This is a reference room. We have the best technology you could possibly put into a color bay. We were coloring off of a Sony 3110, and that particular reference monitor can go up to 4,000 nits. Now, just because you have that container doesn't mean you have to use it. It's just the container. If you think of it like a bucket of water, you could put 1 cup of water in, or you could put a gallon, or you could overflow the container. Doesn't mean one's right or wrong. It's just, this is the canvas that you have to work in. So one of the things that we did once we lifted that middle gray up was allow the highlights to breathe. And so there's moments in there, especially in the final race sequence, where there's all that the Bernoulli is bunch of electricity everywhere. The cars are crashing together. You have explosions. You get the electricity coming off of the cars, and those are peaking. They will kiss the top of that range. Now that does 2 things. One, that gives you a visceral feeling like this is dangerous and something. I need to. You feel the energy of the crashes and the speed of the cars. But it also allows you to lift some things up with that mid gray and have more in the shadows, right? What that also does is allows you to counteract the largest luminance that's probably in your house, which is the sun coming through the window. So this will look good. I mean, I prefer it if you close your shades and watch this in a dark, environment. That is definitely the way it's intended. It is cinema. Please treat it like cinema. But hey, look, people consume their media in many different ways, and we're not here to dictate that. We want you to enjoy it wherever you are. So by giving it that little bit of life, you can see this in many different environments, and it's not like you're not having to like mess with your setting going, it's too dark, I can't see anything. One of the things that was interesting to me just recently, I have some friends that are in the equipment manufacturing space, and they were telling me that most people, when they take their TV out of the box, they leave the settings the way they are, right? Now, that means that you're never really seeing what the filmmaker intended, because that you should be putting your TV in filmmaker mode, 100%. But it was kind of interesting to me thinking like, okay, well then what we're doing here, what we're mastering to is really not how the media is being consumed. So lately, this is more religion than science. I've been kind of reevaluating that and thinking about like, how should we be monitoring, right? I'm never going to make my reference not reference. That will always be the same. But, adding some consumer televisions into the bay and always just keeping an eye and making sure that it looks good, not just on my perfect screen, but on all screens.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, as you just said this, it's like, why aren't smart TVs this smart where they have like, they know what the filmmaker expects it to look like on their screen and make the adjustments automatically, some type of code or something within the movie that tells you how to self-adjust the TV. They kind of,
There definitely is, but you
there
have
is.
to turn it on. It doesn't come
Okay.
by default. You have
Okay.
to go into the settings and go into filmmaker mode, and that
Okay.
will set it exactly. It'll turn off anything that is custom to the manufacturer. It'll put it exactly where my reference display is, and that is what we're always working on. That's what we're approving when we're with the talent, with the filmmakers. That's what they're looking at. So that is the purest form of what comes out of this room. But again, it takes a little part on the consumer side where you have to go in and if you're like me, you want to be experiencing it as close to originally intended as possible. So you have to be turning that on. And that's
I definitely have.
video files out there.
Yeah, I definitely have to double check my settings. I have played enough with it to make sure everything I've seen looks great, but there might be some more final tweaks to make it the most ultimate experience. So that's a good little knowledge there. I can go look at.
Really, filmmaker mode gets you 99% of the way there. You
Yeah.
turn that on, you're most likely good, especially with the newer TVs, from the top manufacturers.
Yeah. And I want to ask you, like, what was the toughest thing about keeping this visual consistency in a film that moves through so many surreal racing worlds and all these scenes and bold environments? Like, what was the toughest thing about keeping it consistent and making sure it doesn't look all over the place? Because y'all did a great job, obviously.
Oh, thank you so much, man. Really, the each scene is kind of its own little bucket, right? So you take any of the racings, the opening race, right, Thunderhead. Well, that has its own particular kind of nighttime. We really wanted the lights to kind of feel bright and poppy and kind of the illumination of that like stadium environment, and it's perfect because it's right as the sun's going down, you kind of have this like perfect magic hour with the night. So that sets its own look, right? So once you have like a few reference frames, usually what we'll do is we'll find like the it's usually typically a wide. You take that and you say, okay, this is the look that we're setting for this scene, and then that becomes the hero. And I kind of keep it in my still store and I pop back and forth and I work through that entire scene, keeping that one that I really love as that reference. Then you move on to the next scene, find the representative frame that kind of tells the whole story for that scene, and lock that down, and then rinse and repeat, and you go through the whole film that way.
Many people watching this are probably going to have this question that I have is like, what type of education or training helps someone become a great colorist like yourself? Like, where does the start? What's a good starting point to get them in this place that you're at and just have that eye and knowledge for the best way to make the improvements?
I don't know. There's many different types of colorists, right? There's colorists that are purely painterly and so much in the art and not so much on the technical side. There's colorists that are not artists at all, that are purely technicians, right? And then you have somewhere in the middle. I would like to consider myself somewhere that blends both lines. For me, I was very blessed, and I got my start in a film lab. And this was like right around when digital was first coming online, with scanning and recording and visual effects being treated in computers. And so I wouldn't trade that for the world, right? Like knowing where we came from helped me kind of treat it very similarly to a digital lab. And if you think of it that way, it's always about how you're processing. And when we make the final render out of the computer, I always consider that that's like the printing process, right? If you just look at a piece of negative, it doesn't look very good. It's not until you print it that the final image reveals itself. So I've always treated it that way. And I think it's, for me at least, coming up from the film lab and being in that analog world and then the transition to digital, that's where my greatest strengths come into play, because I know how we used to do it. I know how hard it was. And I know that we take a lot of this for granted now, especially Control Z.
No, I love that. I love that explanation right there. I have my copy right here. Oh, it's disappearing. Where am I? Where's my face? There we go. There we go. It's somewhere here. I'm gonna probably watch it a million times. So I'm grateful that you were able to give this to us. So for
I love
someone,
that, John.
So to end it on this note, for someone watching at home, what is something they may never notice about great color work, but would absolutely feel it if it was missing?
Well, you kind of hit the nail on the head when we were first starting the conversation. My best work is the work that's never noticed. I don't want you to see the color work. If you're seeing the color work, there's something wrong with either the color work or with the story, right? So really, you shouldn't see anything. You shouldn't be noticing it. But something that I'm super proud of in this one is how we did really kind of utilize the full range and the full dynamic that is available to us today, right? So in my opinion, if you get a new television or something, and you're like, well, let's see what this baby can really do. That's the disc to put in.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a good selling point too. If you want to test your TV, put that in. And honestly, as you wrap up, is when I was watching this movie, I felt like it was just made yesterday. It didn't feel different than what I watched. Like you said, it's consistent throughout, and I just felt like I was watching the same movie because you just kept so much of the soul with these great upgrades and everything. Like it goes unnoticeable. You're just like, wow, this movie came out yesterday or something. But also that movie back in the day was so ahead of its time too. So
ahead of its time. Yeah.
so ahead of its time. And I'm hoping as we continue to talk about Speed Racer, someone listening out there can say, maybe we do some type of follow-up. People want it.
I am all about it. Yes, we need more stories.
I mean, there's so much to tell. I'm not trying to drag, but at this point, I know Speed probably has a little one of himself, so there's just so much you can, if you want to do that big time jump and everything.
The world is not finished. Yeah, we're not finished exploring that world for sure.
No, it's a world that's been around forever, and we all fell in love with it with the animated show and what has been delivered with this live action version. John, this was absolutely extreme pleasure, a great education for something I've always been interested in, and thank you for putting your fingerprints on this 4K version of Speed Racer.
Well, thank you, Sean, and thank you for the time. I really appreciate it.